Hey guys, Kristen here. Today's topic is 7 things to avoid when you have severe chronic fatigue. All right, number 1 thing to avoid when you have severe chronic fatigue are doctors who don't listen to you. If you're seeing a doctor who doubts your experiences of your symptoms, who seems skeptical of you having anything wrong, who says, well, I haven't found anything on the blood work and I did everything, so you're fine, even when you keep telling them you're not, get away. Avoid those doctors. They cannot help you. All right? Go find one who does. The next thing to avoid is the push-crash cycle. The push-crash cycle is when you do more than you know you're capable of doing, and you end up having post-exertional malaise or PEM afterwards, which is severe fatigue vastly out of proportion with the effort you just expended. All right? We want to get out of that because, as I've talked about in old videos, crashing gets in the way of your recovery process, all right? I know it can be so tempting to just push and just get a little bit of things done and then, maybe spend some hours or days or weeks recovering from it, but it is interfering with your recovery. If you're the person who said you'll do anything to recover from this, then you must avoid the push-crash cycle. All right, third thing to avoid is exercise. Very closely related to the push-crash cycle, but in general, do not push yourself to exercise. No matter how long you've been ill with this, if you cannot do a certain level of activity without crashing, then avoid it. Yes, exercise is good and healthy for healthy people. Unfortunately, we are not healthy people when we are mostly housebound or bedridden because of chronic fatigue syndrome, and exercise is the wrong thing to do. All right, next thing to avoid is saying yes too often. All right, we still have this tendency to want to help people and give and do things that make us feel good. So we say yes to people like, oh yeah, I can do that thing for you. Yes, I can take this phone call. Yes, I'll be at that event. When really we know we can't. We know what it's going to cost us to give. And right now, if you are still living with this to the point where it's disabling you, you need to say no to those things. You need to prioritize your recovery. Because when you do recover, that's when you have the ability to say yes and start giving again. If you don't recover, you won't have that ability. It's super important to avoid saying yes too often when you're still ill. All right, next thing to avoid, shaming yourself. I'm sure we've all done this at some point where we start to cycle through those thoughts in our head of, oh, I'm so worthless. I can't even get out of bed today. I can't even make enough money to cover my rent. I can't even do this. I can't even do that. And we really start to feel terrible. We carry this heavy shame around. And that shame is just emotional baggage. And that shame takes a lot of energy to sustain, I tell you what. So if you can drop the shame and accept where you're at and focus on recovery, you are going to be light years ahead of where you are now than if you keep carrying it around with you. Avoid shame. All right, number 6 thing that we need to avoid when living with severe chronic fatigue is mixing up your self-worth with your abilities. It's so easy to say like, oh, if I could only get back to work, if I could only do this thing, if I could only do that thing, I'd feel worthy and lovable and good again. All right, you have it in you, and it's there once you start looking for it, but you have absolute self-worth regardless of your abilities today, regardless of what you do or don't accomplish, regardless of what you can or cannot accomplish. You are worthy and you are lovable. All right, and the number 7 thing to avoid when you're living with severe chronic fatigue is toxic people and relationships. Toxic people and relationships are so incredibly draining to us because they suck out our energy when we're interacting with them, and they continue to suck out our energy after they've moved on for the day. When we're not talking to them, when we're not seeing them, we're still emotionally dealing with their presence in a negative way. And what these toxic relationships are doing is every moment, every second, every minute that you're spending on them, and every little tiny bit of emotional energy that you're spending on them is time and energy that's going into a sinkhole. And if you're able to cut those relationships and people out of your life, you are going to have all of that time and energy available again to invest back into yourself and back into your recovery process, and it's going to help you heal. All right, so to recap that really quickly, 7 things you need to avoid when you're living with severe chronic fatigue are doctors who don't listen, the push-crash cycle, exercise, saying yes too often, shaming yourself, mixing up your self-worth with your abilities, and lastly, toxic people and relationships. If you found this a useful tip on how to live better with severe chronic fatigue, then it would mean the world to me if you would share these videos with somebody who can use them to help them. Whether this is a friend you have or a group that you're a part of, please help me spread the word. And as always, you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel. I post here just about daily. Sending you love and health, I'm Kristen.